The night before my wedding, I sat at a long table in my parents' dining room, surrounded by family members who had already decided my marriage was a mistake. My fiancé, Marcus, sat beside me, his hand resting on my knee under the table. He had this habit of tapping his fingers against his thigh when he was uncomfortable, a nervous rhythm that only I could detect. Tonight, his fingers hadn't stopped moving since we arrived. "So, Marcus," my father said, swirling his wine glass with practiced elegance, "remind me again what you do for work?" Marcus smiled, that crooked smile I had fallen in love with 2 years ago. "I work in technology, sir. Software development mostly." "Software," my mother repeated, as if the word tasted bitter. "How? Practical." My sister Elena leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the chandelier light. She had married a surgeon 3 years ago, and she never let anyone forget it. "That must be difficult," she said with false sympathy. "The tech industry is so unstable these days. All those layoffs." "Elena," I warned. "What?" "I'm just making conversation." She turned to Marcus with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I hope you have savings. Weddings are expensive, and I'd hate to see my sister struggle." If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss ending E. You'll want to see how this unfolds. Marcus squeezed my knee gently. "We'll be fine," he said, his voice calm. "Thank you for your concern." But my family wasn't finished. "I just don't understand the rush," my mother continued, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "You've only known each other 2 years. When I married your father, we dated for 5 years. We knew each other's families. We came from the same background. The same background. That was the real issue, wasn't it? Marcus didn't come from money. At least, that's what they believed. He drove a modest car, wore simple clothes, and lived in a small apartment downtown. To my family, who measured worth in square footage and stock portfolios, he was beneath me. What they didn't know, what I was only beginning to understand myself, was that there was more to Marcus than met the eye. I had noticed things over the past few months. Small things. The way certain phone calls made him step out of the room. The way he never worried about bills, even though his job shouldn't have paid that well. The way he sometimes received packages with company logos I didn't recognize. But I loved him for who he was, not for what he might have. And I trusted him to tell me the truth when he was ready. "Mom," I said firmly, "I love Marcus. He loves me. That's all that matters." "Love doesn't pay the mortgage, sweetheart," my father said with a condescending chuckle. The table erupted in laughter, my parents, my sister, my aunt, and uncle. Even my grandmother, who had always been kind to me, smiled behind her napkin. Marcus's fingers stopped tapping. I looked at him, expecting to see hurt in his eyes. But instead, I saw something else. Patience. As if he was waiting for the right moment, holding something back that would change everything. "You're right, sir," Marcus said quietly. "Love doesn't pay the mortgage. But respect costs nothing, and it seems to be in short supply tonight." The laughter died. My father's face hardened. "Excuse me," I said, Marcus continued, his voice steady, "that I would appreciate it if you treated your daughter with the respect she deserves. She's an intelligent woman who made a choice. Maybe instead of questioning that choice, you could try supporting it." The silence that followed was deafening. No one spoke to my father that way. No one. But Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He simply held my father's gaze until my father looked away first. Under the table, I took Marcus's hand. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from something else entirely. Pride. Gratitude. Love. "I think we should leave," I said, standing up. "Thank you for dinner." My mother started to protest, but I was already walking toward the door. Marcus followed, pausing only to grab our coats from the rack. Outside, the cool night air hit my face, and I finally let myself breathe. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, his hand finding mine in the darkness. "I shouldn't have." "No." I turned to face him, cupping his face in my hands. "Thank you for saying what I've wanted to say for years." He laughed, that crooked laugh I loved, and pressed his forehead against mine. "Your father is going to hate me forever now." "I don't care," I whispered. "I really don't." We walked to his car in silence, but it was a comfortable silence. The kind that comes from knowing someone completely, from trusting them with your whole heart. At least, I thought I knew him completely. As we drove away, I noticed Marcus checking his phone. His brow furrowed slightly before he tucked it back into his pocket. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just work stuff. Nothing important." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that there were no secrets between us, that the man I was marrying tomorrow was exactly who he said he was. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered that I was wrong. That voice would prove right sooner than I expected. The morning of my wedding, I stood in front of a full-length mirror in the church's bridal suite, trying to recognize the woman staring back at me. She wore a simple white dress, not the designer gown my mother had wanted, but something elegant and understated that I had found at a small boutique downtown. Her hair was pulled back in loose waves, and her makeup was minimal. She looked like herself. And somehow, that felt like the bravest choice she had ever made. My maid of honor, my college friend Rachel, appeared behind me in the mirror. "You look beautiful," she said, handing me my bouquet. "Nervous?" Terrified, I admitted. "Good." She grinned. "That means it's real." The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. My family had arrived early, their disapproval hanging in the air like a storm cloud that refused to break. Through the window, I could see them gathering in the courtyard, my father shaking hands with distant relatives, my mother whispering to my sister, their faces pinched with barely concealed disdain. They were still hoping I would change my mind. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Rachel opened it to find one of the church staff, a young woman with a clipboard. "Ms. Anderson? There are some guests arriving that weren't on the original list. They say they're colleagues of the groom." I frowned. "Colleagues?" "Yes, ma'am. About a dozen of them. They arrived in some rather nice cars." Rachel and I exchanged glances. Marcus worked at a tech startup. His colleagues wore jeans and graphic t-shirts, not the kind of attire that typically accompanied rather nice cars. "Let them in," I said slowly. "I'm sure Marcus knows who they are." The staff member nodded and disappeared, but something in my chest tightened, a thread of unease that I couldn't quite explain. 30 minutes later, I stood at the back of the church, my father beside me. He hadn't said a word since we left the bridal suite. His silence was perhaps worse than his criticism, a wall of cold disappointment that made me feel like I was walking toward my own execution rather than my wedding. The music began. Pachelbel's canon, traditional and safe. "Last chance to change your mind," my father muttered under his breath. I didn't respond. I just started walking. The church was beautiful, filled with flowers and soft candlelight. But as I made my way down the aisle, I noticed things that didn't quite fit. Guests I didn't recognize sat on Marcus's side, men and women in expensive suits, watching me with curious, appraising eyes. One of them nodded at me politely, a silver-haired man who carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone used to being in charge. Who were these people? And then I saw Marcus. He stood at the altar, looking more handsome than I had ever seen him. But there was something different about him today. The nervous energy that usually hummed beneath his surface was gone, replaced by a calm assurance that seemed almost regal. He smiled when he saw me, that crooked smile that made my heart skip. But behind his eyes, I caught something else. A flicker of anxiety, a secret waiting to be revealed. The ceremony passed in a blur. Vows were exchanged, rings were placed on fingers, and somewhere in the distance, I heard the priest pronounce us husband and wife. But I wasn't fully present. My mind kept drifting to the strangers in the pews, to the phone calls Marcus always took in private, to the packages with unfamiliar logos. What wasn't he telling me? During the kiss, Marcus held me close and whispered against my lips, "I need to tell you something." Tonight, my blood ran cold. "Marcus, trust me," he said. "Please, just trust me a little longer." The reception was held at a venue I didn't remember choosing, a grand estate on the outskirts of town that my mother had dismissed as too expensive when I first suggested it. Somehow, Marcus had booked it anyway. As we entered the ballroom, I noticed my family's expressions shifting. My father, who had been sullen all day, was now staring at our surroundings with barely concealed confusion. My mother kept glancing at the chandeliers, the marble floors, the staff in crisp uniforms attending to every detail. This wasn't the budget wedding they had expected. "Marcus," I whispered as we took our seats at the head table. "How did you afford all this?" He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "That's what I need to tell you." Before he could continue, the silver-haired man I had noticed in the church approached our table. He extended his hand to Marcus with a warm smile. "Congratulations, son," he said. "Your father would have been proud." Marcus stood and embraced him. "Thank you, Richard. It means a lot that you came. Son, your father." I stared at Marcus as the man walked away. "Who is that?" "Richard Chin," Marcus said quietly. "He was my father's business partner. Before my father passed away, they built a company together. A technology company." My heart began to pound. "What kind of technology company?" Marcus met my eyes. "The kind that's worth about $6 billion. The room seemed to tilt. "Marcus. My full name is Marcus Webb," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "My father was Jonathan Webb. He founded Webb Technologies when I was 12 years old. When he died, I inherited everything. Webb Technologies. I had heard of it. Everyone had heard of it. It was one of the largest software companies in the country, responsible for products that millions of people used every day. And the man I had just married, the man my family had mocked and dismissed, was its sole heir. I couldn't breathe. Why didn't you tell me?" I managed. The pain in his eyes was immediate. "Because I needed to know that you loved me for me, not for what I have." He squeezed my hand. "I was going to tell you after the wedding. I was going to explain everything. But I wanted at least one person in my life who saw the real me first." I understood. In that moment, despite my shock, I understood. But understanding didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. The rest of the reception unfolded like a dream I couldn't wake from. Around me, guests laughed and danced, champagne glasses clinked, and the string quartet played songs I couldn't name. But I sat frozen at the head table, my husband's hand in mine, my mind reeling from the revelation that had just shattered everything I thought I knew. Marcus was a billionaire. The man who lived in a small apartment, who drove a 10-year-old car, who wore the same 3 jackets on rotation, he was worth more money than my entire family combined. More than my father's law firm. More than my sister's surgeon husband could earn in 100 lifetimes. And he had kept it from me. I understood why. I did. After years of being judged by my own family for superficial reasons, I understood the desire to be seen for who you really were. But understanding didn't erase the sting of discovering that the person I trusted most had hidden such a fundamental truth. "You're angry," Marcus said softly. "I'm processing," I corrected. "There's a difference." Across the room, I could see my family huddled together, their expressions ranging from disbelief to something that looked dangerously close to calculation. My mother kept glancing at the silver-haired man, Richard Chin, as if trying to place where she had seen him before. My father was on his phone, probably Googling Webb Technologies heir. The moment they connected the dots, everything would change. "They're going to find out," I said. "I know. And they're going to pretend they supported us all along." Marcus nodded slowly. "Probably. That doesn't bother you?" He turned to face me fully, his dark eyes searching mine. "What bothers me is that you're hurt. What bothers me is that I should have told you sooner, and I didn't because I was scared." He took both my hands in his. "I spent my whole life watching people change when they found out about the money. Friends who suddenly needed loans. Women who were more interested in my inheritance than my personality. I was so afraid of losing you that I made the wrong choice. You should have trusted me," I said, and my voice cracked despite my best efforts. "I know." His voice was rough with emotion. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught my attention. My father was striding toward us, his face a mask of forced composure that barely concealed his agitation. "Marcus," he said, stopping at our table. "Might I have a word?" Marcus stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. "Of course, sir." I watched them walk toward a quiet corner of the room, my father's posture stiff with something that might have been embarrassment. Through the crowd, I could see their conversation, my father gesturing, Marcus nodding calmly, his hands clasped behind his back. My mother appeared at my side. "Sweetheart," she said, and her voice had a new quality to it. Softer, almost sweet. "I feel like we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. I want you to know that your father and I have always supported your decisions. We just want what's best for you." The hypocrisy was so thick I could taste it. "Is that so?" I said flatly. "Of course." She patted my hand. "Marcus seems like a wonderful man. We're so happy for you both." I pulled my hand away. 30 minutes ago, you were whispering to Elena about how I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I heard you, Mom. I heard everything." Her face reddened. "I don't know what you think you heard." "Stop." The word came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't apologize. "Just stop." Across the room, my father was shaking Marcus's hand. Not the reluctant, limp handshake he had offered at the rehearsal dinner, but a firm, enthusiastic grip. The kind he reserved for important clients and wealthy acquaintances. Something inside me broke. "You know what the saddest part is?" I said, turning back to my mother. "Nothing about Marcus has changed. He's the same person he was yesterday, the same person you mocked and dismissed. The only thing that's different is what you know about his bank account." My mother opened her mouth to respond, but I stood up before she could speak. "Excuse me. I need some air." I walked through the ballroom, past the dancing guests and the champagne fountains, past my sister, who was suddenly very interested in getting my attention. I pushed through a side door and stepped onto a terrace overlooking the gardens. The cool evening air hit my face, and I finally let myself breathe. "You okay?" I turned to find Rachel behind me, her face creased with concern. "I don't know," I admitted. "I just watched my entire family do a complete 180 because they found out my husband has money. 24 hours ago, they were treating him like dirt. Now they're acting like they've always been his biggest supporters." Rachel came to stand beside me at the railing. "That says everything about them and nothing about you." "Does it?" I laughed bitterly. "Because right now, I feel like an idiot. I married a man who lied to me about who he was, and my family only respects my choice because of something as shallow as money. What does that say about my judgment?" "It says you fell in love with someone for the right reasons," Rachel said firmly. "And it says your family has issues that have nothing to do with you." We stood in silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "He should have told me," I said finally. "Yeah," Rachel agreed. "He should have. But I've seen the way that man looks at you. Whatever his reasons were, they weren't malicious. Talk to him. Really talk to him. And then decide what you want to do." She squeezed my shoulder and went back inside, leaving me alone with my thoughts. A few minutes later, the door opened again. This time, it was Marcus. He didn't say anything at first. He just came to stand beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "Your father apologized to me," he said quietly. "Did he?" "He said he was wrong about me. That he's glad you chose someone who can take care of you." I shook my head in disgust. "Take care of me? As if I'm a child who needs looking after." "That's not what this is about for me," Marcus said. "You know that, right? I didn't reveal who I was to impress your family. I revealed who I was because I was done hiding." I turned to face him. "But you hid it from me, Marcus. For 2 years. I know." His voice was heavy with regret. "And if I could go back, I would do it differently. I would tell you the truth from the beginning, and I would trust that you were different from everyone else. Because you're different. You always have been. Then why didn't you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because my father warned me before he died. He said the money would always be a barrier. That people would never see past it to who I really was. And I believed him. I believed it so completely that I built walls around myself without even realizing it." I studied his face, the face I had memorized over 2 years of loving him. The slight crook in his nose from a childhood accident. The way his eyebrows furrowed when he was thinking hard. The vulnerability in his eyes that he showed to no one else. This was still the man I fell in love with. The money didn't change that. But the lie had damaged something between us. Something that would take time to repair. "I need you to promise me something," I said. "Anything. No more secrets." No more protecting me from the truth because you think you know what's best. If we're going to do this, if we're going to build a life together, it has to be built on honesty. Complete honesty. Marcus took my hands in his. I promise. No more secrets. Not ever. I searched his eyes for any trace of deception and found none. Okay, I said finally. Okay. He pulled me into his arms, and I let him. Despite everything, his embrace still felt like home. But as we stood there, I made a silent promise to myself. My family's approval meant nothing. It had been bought with information about wealth, and that made it worthless. What mattered now was building something real with the man I had chosen, not because of what he had, but in spite of it. Tomorrow, I would start setting boundaries with my family. Tonight, I would dance with my husband. The weeks following our wedding were a study in contrasts. On one hand, Marcus and I settled into married life with a surprising ease. We moved into a modest house in the suburbs, not the mansion his wealth could have afforded, but a cozy 3-bedroom that felt like ours. Marcus went back to work, still preferring to be hands-on with his company's software development rather than playing the role of distant billionaire. I continued my job as a high school English teacher, grading essays and coaching debate team like nothing had changed. Because for us, nothing really had. But for my family, everything had changed. The phone calls started 3 days after we returned from our honeymoon. My mother, suddenly interested in weekly lunches. My father, offering investment advice that I hadn't asked for. My sister, suggesting we go shopping together, her treat, of course, though I suspected she was hoping for the reverse. I declined them all. You're going to have to talk to them eventually, Marcus said one evening as we cooked dinner together. He was chopping vegetables while I stirred sauce on the stove, a routine we had fallen into that felt domestic and wonderful. I know, I admitted. I just don't know what to say. How about starting with how you feel? I set down the spoon and turned to face him. I feel angry and sad and honestly, embarrassed. My whole life, I let them make me feel small because I didn't fit their idea of success. And now they're falling over themselves to be close to me, and it's only because of your money. Marcus set down the knife and came around the counter to stand in front of me. Their behavior is not your fault. I know that logically, but it still hurts. He pulled me into a hug, resting his chin on top of my head. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to demand better. And whatever you decide to do, I'll support you. Even if I decide to cut them off completely, even then. I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to do exactly that, to walk away from years of criticism and condescension and never look back. But another part of me remembered birthday parties and holiday dinners and the complicated, messy love that families sometimes share despite their flaws. I don't want to cut them off, I said finally. But I need them to understand that things are going to be different now. Marcus nodded. Then let's make that happen. 2 days later, I invited my parents and sister to our house for dinner. They arrived exactly on time, a first for my perpetually fashionably late family. My mother brought flowers. My father brought wine. My sister brought a gift-wrapped box that probably contained something expensive and impersonal. They were on their best behavior, and somehow that made everything worse. What a lovely home, my mother said, looking around our living room with barely concealed surprise. It's so cozy. We like it, I said evenly. We made small talk through the appetizers and main course, dancing around the elephant in the room with practiced precision. But by the time dessert was served, I couldn't take it anymore. We need to talk, I said, setting down my fork. About the wedding. About what happened before the wedding. My family exchanged glances. Sweetheart, my father began. We've already apologized to Marcus. I'm not talking about Marcus. I'm talking about me. The table went quiet. For as long as I can remember, I continued, my voice steady despite the trembling in my chest. You've made me feel like I wasn't good enough. Like my choices were always wrong. My taste was always inferior. My judgment was always flawed. When I told you I was marrying Marcus, you didn't ask if he made me happy. You asked what he did for a living. We were just concerned. My mother started. No, let me finish. I took a breath. At the rehearsal dinner, you openly mocked him. You laughed at me for choosing him. And then, when you found out he was wealthy, suddenly everything changed. Suddenly you were supportive. Suddenly you were proud. My sister shifted uncomfortably in her seat. My father's jaw tightened. Do you understand how that feels? I asked. To know that your love and approval are conditional? That they can be bought with information about bank accounts. Silence. I married Marcus because he sees me, I said. The real me. Not the version you wanted me to be, not some projection of your own ambitions, me. And I need you to decide whether you can accept that. Whether you can love me for who I actually am, not for who I'm married to. My mother's eyes glistened with tears. My father stared at his plate. My sister, for once in her life, had nothing to say. I don't expect an answer right now, I continued. But I need you to know that I won't tolerate being treated the way I was treated before. Not anymore. If you want to be part of my life, you need to respect my choices, even when you don't understand them. Another long moment of silence. Then my father spoke. You're right. I looked at him in surprise. You're right, he repeated, his voice rough. We were wrong. I was wrong. I spent so much time trying to control your future that I forgot to trust your judgment. And when Marcus stood up to me at the rehearsal dinner, when he defended you, I should have respected that. Instead, I resented him for it. He met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw genuine remorse in his expression. I can't promise I'll change overnight, he said. Old habits are hard to break. But I can promise to try. If you'll let me. I felt tears prick at my eyes. This wasn't the grand apology I had imagined, but it was real. It was honest. And it was more than I had expected. I'd like that, I said quietly. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. We do love you, sweetheart. We always have. We got lost somewhere along the way. We forgot what really matters. I squeezed her hand back. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The rest of the evening passed more smoothly. Conversations felt lighter, more genuine. My sister even made a joke that didn't have a barbed edge hidden inside it. By the time they left, something had shifted between us. Not everything was fixed, but the foundation for healing had been laid. After closing the door behind them, I turned to find Marcus watching me from the hallway. How do you feel? He asked. I considered the question. Lighter, I said finally. Like I've been carrying this weight for years, and I finally set it down. He smiled, that crooked smile I loved, and opened his arms. I walked into his embrace, pressing my cheek against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. I'm proud of you, he murmured against my hair. I'm proud of us, I corrected. And I meant it. We had faced judgment and secrets and family drama, and we had come out the other side stronger. Not because of his wealth or my determination, but because of what we had built together, a partnership based on trust, respect, and the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions attached. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. Inside, we held each other in the quiet comfort of our home, ready to face whatever came next. Together. Thank you so much for listening this story. If you connected with it, if it made you feel something, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to stand up to family who didn't support your choices? How did you handle it? And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. I post every week, and trust me, there are some amazing stories coming your way. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember, you deserve to be loved for exactly who you are.